Oh, hey, you caught me in the middle of my little project. I'm trying to go through and watch every movie ever made. Right now I'm on 12 Angry Men, and hopefully by the end of the day I'll make it to Z. But you see, there's been something nagging me this entire time. I'm sitting here watching all the movies that have been made, when I'm bummed thinking about all the movies that haven't been made, that I'll never get to see. And there's a surprising amount of films that fall into this category, especially given how many big franchises have fell victim to this. For instance, I'll have watched this, but the whole time I'll be thinking about how I could have watched this. Bummer. It's always fascinating to me when a movie gets canceled.
We're shutting down production.
It's one thing to pitch a movie and it get rejected, that happens all the time. But it's another for a movie to start production and then just seemingly stop. Sometimes this can be very early on, other times it's near completion. So let's take a look at a few shining examples of what could have been and try to understand why they just couldn't make it to the finish line. Kicking it off is one of several sequels, more specifically superhero sequels, Spider-Man 4. Spider-Man 3 was supposed to be the capper to Sam Raimi's beloved Spider-Man trilogy, which ruled the superhero genre in the 2000s. And when the final film gave Sony a hearty helping of humble pie from both critics and audiences, they decided to go back to the drawing board. See, the main problem with why the third Spider-Man didn't work was a lack of focus. A lot of people point to there being too many villains, and while that is true, it's not really telling the whole story. You can have multiple villains in a movie like this so long as they're properly balanced. Villains just seem to sort of appear and disappear at a whim in this movie. I was watching this a while ago with my brother, who just casually points out how Venom just disappears for big chunks of the final fight. See, this all stems from how Raimi wanted the movie to be about Sandman, while the studio pushed hard for Venom, so they compromised. And you can kind of tell since Sandman scenes were clearly much more thought out, having way more care put into them. So it would be best to just let Sam do whatever he wanted for the fourth one, right? The guy put Bruce Campbell in a superhero movie 3 times, he's above being questioned. He wanted to use the Vulture as the main villain, and after getting Toby and Kirsten on board, it seemed like it was ready to go. Unfortunately, this was gaining momentum just as the modern superhero boom started. With the MCU and the Dark Knight movies, Spider-Man seemed to be overstaying its welcome a bit as a franchise that wouldn't modernize. Sony decided to do a complete reboot for the character with The Amazing Spider-Man in 2012, taking on a more gritty feel which was popularized by movies like The Dark Knight. But this, of course, cancelled any plans for a Spider-Man 4. However, the story doesn't end here. After the release of Spider-Man No Way Home, which featured Tobey back as Spider-Man, rumors started popping up that Sony was interested in making a Spider-Man 4 again. Raimi, who just finished up making the new Doctor Strange film, has commented on this, saying he isn't opposed to working on it. While there isn't much info regarding the project outside of the ever-reliable Facebook, the fact that it's gaining attention from even Raimi himself is nothing to scoff at. I'll believe it when I see it, but hey, never say never, I guess. This is similar to how the reboot itself is a victim of cancelled sequels, except they just sped up the process and only made 2 movies. The first Amazing Spider-Man, starring Andrew Garfield, wasn't exactly beloved right out of the gate by critics or fans, but still brought in a huge box office return and was liked well enough for people to look past its flaws. Although when the sequel came around, those issues started to become a bit clearer. The script just felt very unfocused and had way too much going on with a plot that didn't make much sense, while also feeling more concerned with setting up its own universe than standing on its own. While it was a hit, making almost as much as the first, the backlash was just too loud to ignore, and they cancelled plans for the third movie and are now allowing Marvel to use him in the MCU. Surprisingly, not much is known about what this movie was going to be about in the end, however, since it seems like they got cold feet not too far into development. Speaking of superheroes, let's now move over to the wonderful world of DC. After the Superman franchise was put on ice by that, Warner Brothers wanted to reboot the franchise with a new lead and team behind it. To do this, they hired Tim Burton, who had already proven he could make a good superhero movie with Batman. For the choice of writing the film, they chose Kevin Smith. And for playing Superman himself, they got Nicolas Cage. What? Yes, he was a very hot commodity at the time, and of course has a strong chin, but when I see Superman, I think this, not this. The film was gaining a large amount of momentum under the title Superman Lives, and there was even rumors Christopher Walken was going to jump on board to play Brainiac. But what I'm sure no one was expecting was the creative liberties they were going to take. Early costume tests saw Cage sporting long hair and wearing a weird latex-looking suit. And with producer John Peters' weird demands and seemingly not knowing anything about the character, fans were certainly in for a treat.
He's like, I got some directives for you if you're going to move forward on the process. Some things I want you to do and don't in the script. He's going, 3 things. Okay, I said, all right. He's going, 1, I don't want to see him in that suit. 2, I don't want to see him fly. And 3, he's got to fight a giant spider in the 3rd act.
The project eventually just lost steam when Warner Brothers shifted focus away from superheroes after the critical and financial beating they took with Batman and Robin. On top of other flops that were happening, the project was put on ice indefinitely, and with Superman Returns coming out in 2006 pretty much meant that this project was long dead. If you want to know more about it, check out the documentary The Death of Superman Lives, which goes into way more detail than I ever could. If you're looking for any kind of closure, they hired Cage to voice Superman in a scene for Teen Titans Go to the Movies, as a sort of wink wink nudge nudge to the whole thing.
Stop it! How are you going to get past me? I mean...
What's funny is it's not to think that this didn't get very far. Warner Brothers had already sunk around $12 million into the production, with $10 million going to Cage himself, who was paid regardless if the movie was made or not. So this was certainly shaping up to be their next big tentpole film. But shifting gears to projects that didn't get very far, we need not turn too far away from Neil Blomkamp. This guy has more canceled projects than the US military probably wants to admit. He infamously worked for years on a Halo movie with Peter Jackson, which was canceled due to studio politics and budgetary issues.
It's like, you remember the 80 crew members that are working right now and like the vehicles you built and all the armor and all that shit that Weta's making? Yeah? Okay, that's all done. Pack your bags, go back to Canada.
I already went into greater detail about that in this other video that you should totally watch. But another film he was working on was an installment in the Alien franchise. Blomkamp himself said that this was one of his all-time favorite series, and was what got him into filmmaking. He was planning to make a direct sequel to Aliens, ignoring the events of Alien 3 and so on. When speaking to Sigourney Weaver about this, she immediately latched onto the project.
Yes, there is an incredible script, written and to be directed by Neil Blomkamp, who was a fan growing up in South Africa who loved these movies so much that he broke the tapes. And when we were working together on Chappie, a movie I love, we started chatting about how the series left Ripley.
The problem is the film as it stands never really got past scripting concept development, as it wasn't able to get any real studio backing. Neil worked with Sigourney on a couple of short films for his YouTube channel, which was nice to see that they were collaborating, and he released a new movie just last year, so it seems that everybody moved on from this project as it couldn't get any real traction. Blomkamp himself has even said he probably wouldn't say yes if given another chance to work on it, since Fox just doesn't seem interested and that he hasn't even touched the project in years. But hey, at least we can hold out hope for his RoboCop movie, right? Right? Speaking of Fox and their loving parents Disney. Ah yes, the barren wasteland of dead projects. And this isn't exactly new for them to do. In the late 90s, during what's now known as the Disney Renaissance, they planned following up the enormously successful Lion King with what was to be described as an Incan epic. The project was titled Kingdom of the Sun and was to be a slightly mature film dealing with mystical elements with a plot described to be similar to The Prince and the Pauper. They even got Sting on board to work on the soundtrack, and the cast included Owen Wilson and David Spade. But its production started showing some cracks pretty early on, as Disney felt it was way too similar to other Prince and the Pauper stories, including their own. On top of trying to make the film more original and attempting to break away from the standard Disney formula, it overall just lacked a solid focus. The film had a targeted release date of summer 2000, as they already had promotional ties with McDonald's and other companies who needed the film to be released then. But by the summer of 1998, it was clear that probably wasn't going to be met. Randy Fulmer, the producer on the film, recounts an instance when a Disney executive stormed into his office and said, "Your film is this close to being shut down." Eventually, the director, Roger Allers, dropped out, and the project was completely overhauled and was released as The Emperor's New Groove. While not a bad movie at all, it's a shame that we could have gotten something on a much larger and more epic scale. There has been a push on social media in the last year to release Allers' official cut. Could #ReleaseTheAllersCut pressure Disney in completing this version? Nope, I certainly don't think it will. But moving on to more modern Disney productions, turn no further than to what they've done with the galaxy far, far away. Star Wars, before and after Disney acquired it, has had more production woes than I would care to go into. George Lucas himself was trying to get a live-action series called Star Wars Underground made, which would have taken place between episodes 3 and 4, and he even wrote his own trilogy of sequel films, which he gave to Disney when he sold over the rights. And then Disney took those scripts and threw them right in the trash, instead opting to make their own trilogy. However, they aren't all as they seem. Originally, each film was going to be helmed by a different director, with J.J. Abrams directing Episode 7, Rian Johnson directing Episode 8, and Jurassic World director Colin Trevorrow directing Episode 9. But with Episode 8 receiving online backlash and Disney being scared by a bunch of Redditors who complained about the film, they decided to completely overhaul what Trevorrow had done up until that point. Originally, the film was going to feature way more elements that tied it into The Last Jedi and would have most likely pleased both fans and detractors of Episode 8. But instead what we got barely resembled the original plot and is pretty much an entirely different film, although Trevorrow still received a writing credit. Now I can't confirm this for myself, but I do have a theory of why this happened. You see, despite the script, which you can find yourself online, seemingly good enough, it needed some sort of hook to win back all the fans Disney thought they lost. So, shoo in the Emperor here, downplay the connection to The Last Jedi there, bada bing bada boom, and bam! Now, one I wanted to give attention to is Elf. Yeah, you know, the movie that your mom and aunt watch religiously during the holidays. You've even been given some Elf-related attire from Five Below around Christmas time, I'm sure. The original was a massive runaway hit, raking in over $225 million on a $33 million budget. It's no surprise that they wanted to churn out a sequel, especially given Will Ferrell's huge popularity at the time. Although, that would be its unraveling. Ferrell was offered an estimated $29 million to do the sequel, but didn't because he lacked interest in doing it and felt like it wouldn't be anything more than a paycheck. Now, there are rumors that he and Jon Favreau butted heads on set for the first film, which also contributed to his hesitation. But I couldn't find anything substantial to back this up, and honestly, I don't buy it. Besides, what would the sequel even be about? Helping Santa run for Congress? Well, that already happened. For real. I could go on and on about projects that never made it off the ground. The canceled Lego Batman sequel, the failed George Miller Justice League film, the various Space Jam sequels, Guillermo del Toro's those, and so on. But it's important to ask yourself if these movies would have been good to begin with. I mean, it's certainly hard to tell since we'll most likely never see most of them, but I think when something is cut short, its legacy is embellished a bit. Like, I swear to this day, William Henry Harrison would have been the greatest president of all time if he had served more than 1 month. But hopefully we'll see some of these projects come to life, or at least get more info on them. Like, Owen Wilson starring in an Incan film was something I didn't think I or anyone else needed, but now constantly keeps me up at night wanting it.